This is the last video I'm going to record for you guys. Okay, so will I prove myself? Let's see. You might remember I claimed that I'm a 40% free throw shooter. Some of you have been a little bit skeptical and maybe believe that I'm less than an 80% free throw shooter. So sure, I'll take another simple random sample of 50 free throws to prove myself. Okay, so first thing I want you to try to write the appropriate hypotheses for the significance test and be sure to define the parameter of interest. I also want you to try question 2. Yeah, get as far as you can in question 3 as well. And then when you're ready, then we can go over that stuff. Well, question 3, nah, just do 1 and 2. Okay, go. All right, so hypotheses here are null hypothesis is always like the most boring possible thing. So that would be that I am telling the truth. So my true proportion is 0.0 or 0.8, excuse me. And just to say what that means is I'm telling the truth about being an 80% shooter. Okay, our alternative hypothesis, for those of you who think that I'm lying, is that I'm actually less than an 80% shooter. I don't think anyone thinks I'm more than an 80% shooter. All right, and then it gave you a hint here. Be sure to define the parameter of interest. You always have to say what P is actually signifying here. P means the true proportion of free throws that I make. All right, question 2. What is a type 2 error in this setting? So type 2 error would be that I am less than an 80% free throw shooter. But we fail to reject the null hypothesis. So this means I am lying, but we don't reject this. So we kind of still think I'm telling the truth. All right, so let's suppose that my true free throw percentage is actually 66%. That would mean that our alternative hypothesis is true. I want you to enter all of this information into that applet from the link. I will walk you through that over there as well. The website's maybe a little less intuitive than it could be, and then we'll talk through some stuff from there. Okay. So with this, our null value, I want you to change that to 0.8. So I'm using this slider right at the top left, changing that to, there we go, 0.8. Oh, if that slider bothers you, you can also just enter a numerical value. Let me just do that. Okay. Our alternative hypothesis is a less than hypothesis because the alternative is that I'm actually less than an 80% shooter. It's asking you to display the type 2 error. And then we have to adjust a couple other things. It says that my true value is 0.66. So the second slider, I'm going to change that to, so close, to be 0.66. Okay, there we go. Great. Our sample size is 50 because I'm taking another 50 free throws. And then we can keep that as a 5% level for alpha. All right, so based off of this, for the next question, it says if H sub A, I want to make sure I'm talking about the right question here. Yep, so for question 3A, if the alternative hypothesis is true, what is the probability of a type 2 error? And it tells us that. If you look up at the top right under the title says errors in significance testing, it tells us, okay, the probability of a type 1 is 5%, but we should know that because that's the same thing as our significance level. And then next to that, our type 2 error is a 24%. So that's our answer for 3A. The probability of a type 2 error is 0.24. And that's what that blue shaded area is showing us. That would be if I'm actually less than an 80% shooter, but we don't reject the null hypothesis. Okay, then for 3B, if the alternative hypothesis is true, what is the probability of a good decision? Well, if the probability of a bad decision is 0.24, the probability of a good decision is 0.76. So that's 3B. Okay, for question C, it says interpret the probability of a good decision in terms of the problem. So I'm going to go back to my slides quick for that part. So what this means is, there we go. Nope, almost. There. If I am a 66% free throw shooter, there is a 0.76 probability that we decide correctly that I'm lying. AKA that we're rejecting our null hypothesis. All right, so if you need more time with that, hit pause. I'm going to head back to that website. Disconnected from server. Oh dear. Got to reset everything. Okay, so my null hypothesis value is 0.8. Hopefully you don't have to reset it all. You probably don't because you're just going from one tab to another. Okay, let's see, it was a less than. And now I'm asking you to display the power. And what else? True value is 0.66. Sorry to make you watch me do this. There we go. Whew, okay, sample size is good. And we can keep that as a 0.05 alpha level for now. Okay, so what I'm asking you to do here is to play around with these sliders. For A, I want you to play around with the sample size. For B, I want you to play around with the significance or alpha level. And then for C, I want you to play around with the alternative p-value. What I want us to try to do is to increase the power of our test. So now you'll see that, okay, the power, this is some vocab that you'll get in just a sec. The power is what's the probability of deciding correctly. It's like the opposite of a type 2 error. So you can see now the power is shaded in green. If I compare that to the type 2 error, those are complements. So like the type 2 error plus the power have to add up to 1. But I only want to show the power for now. So the power based off of this is 0.76. It's that number that we got for question 3B. And I can see that that's labeled in the top right. So again, I want you to play around with the different sliders and tell me how could you increase the power of the test. So with each of these, like if I mess around with this first slider, what happens to the power? How can I make the power increase from where it was originally? Same thing with the other ones. When you're ready to go over those, hit play. All right, so for A, we're adjusting the sample size. So that's going to be the second slider down. And if I increase my sample size, the power of the test increases. I can tell it's increasing because like the green area is getting larger, but also if you look at the top right, it tells you my power now is 98%. when originally it was 76. So for A, you can say that we want to increase sample size if we're trying to increase the power. Okay, I'm just going to keep my sample size there. That's not dragging anymore. For the alpha level, let's see what happens if I increase my alpha level. I can see that my power is increasing as my alpha level increases. Okay. And then the last one, hang on. Originally we were there. Yeah. So if I increase that level, my power will increase as well. The true value of P, so this is the, for C, let's see what happens. If I decrease that, well, if I increase it, let's just do that first. Power decreases, but if I go down, the power increases. So to summarize that stuff for question 3, for question 4, and then we'll do some notes. All right, this is our last lesson for the whole unit. Okay, so I'm gonna write real quick up again the chart that we use for errors, because now that we know the term power, we can add that to that chart. So with this, remember that it was a truth and a conclusion chart. Okay, remember this was our type 1. This is type 2. These are happy faces. But what we're going to add is that this box will tell you your power. So basically, power, I want to talk about that. It's the probability that we reject the null hypothesis given that the alternative hypothesis is true. Putting this in context, or interpreting it, if alternative hypothesis is true, and then you're going to have to provide context if you're interpreting, like always, there is a blank, and in the blank you're going to put the power probability of finding convincing evidence to reject the null hypothesis. And again, you're going to have to put that in context. So that would be our interpretation. And then last thing, to increase the power, a couple of things we can do. You can increase your sample size. You can increase your alpha. Or you can increase the distance from h sub 0 to h sub a. Like if your null value is further away from the value that you're using, that'll increase your power as well. All right, so we just have one more check for understanding to do. Give that a shot, get as far as you can. When you're ready to go over it with me, you can hit play. All right, so I'm not gonna read this out because hopefully you already did. If not, hit pause, try this on your own. Okay, so here it's asking us to interpret the fact that the power is 0.1. Okay, so I'm gonna basically use what I put in notes for the interpretation, but just fill in the blanks here. So if, and here I'm gonna describe our alternative hypothesis. So if the true proportion of guests that attend is 0.70, there is a 0.10 probability that they find convincing evidence to reject the null hypothesis. And I'm going to say what that is, that the proportion of guests is 0.75. All right, next up is asking us to find our probabilities for type 1 and for type 2. So your type 1 error probability is always just equal to your significance level, which is 0.05 for this. So that's pretty easy. It's just equal to alpha. The probability of a type 2 error, to do that, it's going to be, did I put this in our notes? No, I didn't. Sorry. Okay. So here, probability of type 1, we did talk about this already, is alpha. But the probability of type 2, which we didn't really talk about, we did like a little bit, it's 1 minus the power. Okay, so back to this. It's going to be 1 minus my power, which is 1 minus 0.10, which is 0.90. All right, last part, C. Determine whether each of the following changes would increase or decrease the power and explain. So for A, the power decreases because the significance level decreased. It's harder to reject the null hypothesis. All right, and then for B, if we're using a larger sample size, the power increases because sample size increased. All right, so that is it for the lessons for this unit. Before you jump into doing the multiple choice review, if you need more help on this, and I just want to normalize that, this is not the ideal way to learn math, watching videos that someone made for you a month in advance. So it's okay if you're feeling just very confused about this stuff. I would encourage you to check out the Khan Academy videos. Sometimes just hearing things explained in a different way can be very helpful. Those are linked onto the quarter 4 overview. I would encourage you to check out your textbook. I have the chapters which chapters correlate to this unit are also in that overview doc. And then also there are videos on AP Classroom. I know we watched one of them a while ago and the feedback was mixed about it, but I think that where those videos are helpful is if you've already seen something and you kind of need a review or another explanation. I don't think those videos are great for if you're trying to learn something for the first time. So please check some of those out first when you're feeling a little bit more ready. The other assignment that's due for this week is Unit 6 on AP Classroom, the multiple choice, the remaining parts, so parts C and D. And then after this, we're going to be jumping and doing all of our work on the Stats Medic review course. If you're someone who wants to make sure to cover the remaining units that we didn't really get to, so units 7, 8, and 9, there is information about where to find that content. It's on that weekly or the quarter overview. I hope the quarter is going okay for you guys. Like I said a million times, it's just not an ideal situation, but I'm sending out my best wishes to you from the past. And when you see me, if you're not a senior, if you see me in the hallways next year, you got to tell me who you are, tell me how stats went for you, and I think that's that. All right, see you guys later.